Welcome to BRF Report channel breaking news. Factual reports. Today's breaking news update. Putin forming horror alliance of pariah states with a graver threat to Western USSR. Putin's trip to Iran sign of weakness as Ukraine war not going the way he expected. Putin in Tehran gets strong support from Iran over Ukraine. Here are the details. Putin forming horror alliance of pariah states with a graver threat to Western USSR. Vladimir Putin is forming a new alliance of pariah states, which threatens to pose a graver threat than the Soviet Union, it has been warned. Kremlin insiders who are critical of the war in Ukraine told Bloomberg early in the special military operation they were concerned about the impact this would have on Russia's standing on the world stage. They stressed they could not raise their worries to Putin himself, because there was no chance of changing his mind. But commentators are now suggesting that, while Moscow is now set to be increasingly isolated from the West, it will turn and is already turning to forge new allegiances with other countries. These combined could, it has been argued, spell more danger for European and US leaders than the old Soviet bloc. Mark Armand, director of the Crisis Research Institute, Oxford, wrote in today's Mail, "In the First Cold War, the West wrestled with both communist ideology as well as Russian power. Looming threats that terrified us for years. Today, the threat has changed and comes in the form of a permanently outlawed Russia, a vast Eurasian state in partnership with China, Iran and other pariah states, the threat that looms large across the entire Northern Hemisphere. I do not feel it is an exaggeration to say this emerging menace is potentially an even bigger rival to the West than the old Soviet bloc." He added that, "We will need to swiftly rediscover the staying power we had in the 20th century to face it down." His comments came just days after reports emerged that Iran was ready to export military equipment to Russia. Tehran's Army Ground Forces Commander Qumars Haidari said, "We are ready to export military equipment and weapons." According to the Young Journalists Club, US officials had previously said Iran was also preparing to send several hundreds of drones to aid Moscow's efforts in Ukraine. These are much needed by Russian troops, given the rapid rate of ammunition and artillery consumption by both sides in the ongoing conflict. Before the announcement, a senior Western official last month told the Washington Post, "There will come a time when the tiny advances Russia is making become unsustainable in light of the costs, and they will need a significant pace to regenerate capability." Iranian support could tip the balance of such predictions, especially given Ukraine's own shortages. One recent intelligence report by Ukrainian and Western officials said Kiev's forces were outgunned 20-1 to Russia in artillery and 40-1 in ammunition, and low stockpiles in Western countries attempting to keep the country fighting. China has also stepped up as an essential partner for Russia, increasing its exports of microchips and other electronic components and raw materials since the invasion of Ukraine. Some of these have military applications, others will be essential for keeping the home economy active amid tough Western sanctioning. Putin's trip to Iran sign of weakness as Ukraine war not going the way he expected. Vladimir Putin's trip to Iran is a sign of weakness on Russia's part as the war is not going the way he expected, a former US ambassador to Ukraine reveals. Former US ambassador to Ukraine John Herbst has exposed that Vladimir Putin has made his second international trip since he launched the invasion of Ukraine in a bid to get more weapons. Ambassador Herbst says Putin feels the war is not going the way he expected, despite Russian troops making gains into the eastern and southern part of Ukraine. As a potential sign of an upcoming change of tide, Putin is seeking to reinforce his arsenal of weapons. When asked why Putin is making the trip now, Ambassador Herbst told VOA, "I think this trip is a sign of weakness. And he's going to Iran in part because has a weapons problem, and the fact that he's seeking weapons from Iran is a very telling marker that in fact, the war is not going the way he's expected, and that his wanted advantage, which is not a false advantage in military equipment, is by no means overwhelming and by no means decisive. The way I describe this, I'm not a military expert. People who have more credentials than me in military analysis describe the Russian military as having the second or third most powerful conventional force in the world, right? Whether it's China or Russia. I don't know who's second. While the second or third most powerful military in the world has been stopped by a country of much smaller size, a much weaker military, and with far fewer weapons, and again, the fact that they go hat in hand to the Iranians is an indication of that. Ambassador Herbst said, "So, Putin is there to show support with Iran, because at the moment, he needs their drones." Putin went to his first summit outside Russia since the beginning of the war in Tehran, Iran, in a bid to strike a weapons deal with Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. According to US officials, Iran is preparing to help supply Russia with several hundred unmanned aerial vehicles, or drones. However, neither Iran nor Russia has so far confirmed the statement. Russia deepening an alliance with Iran to kill Ukrainians is something that the whole world should look at and see as a profound threat, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said. John Kirby, the White House's chief National Security Council spokesman, told reporters there was no indication yet that Iran has given drones to Russia. According to Global Firepower, an index collecting data from 142 modern military powers, Russia has the second most powerful military force in the world. Trailing behind the United States, Russia has just under 70 million people available for military service, with just under 47 million who are deemed fit for service, Global Firepower finds. It has 850,000 active personnel and 250,000 in reserve, for a total of 1,350,000, according to Global Firepower, while the ISS's military balance estimates Russia's active personnel strength to be 900,000. Putin, in Tehran, gets strong support from Iran over Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin won staunch support from Iran on Tuesday for his country's military campaign in Ukraine, with Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei saying the West opposes an independent and strong Russia. Khamenei said that if Russia hadn't sent troops into Ukraine, it would have faced an attack from NATO later, a statement that echoed Putin's own rhetoric and reflected increasingly close ties between Moscow and Tehran as they both face crippling Western sanctions. NATO allies have bolstered their military presence in Eastern Europe and provided Ukraine with weapons to help counter the Russian attack. If the road would have been open to NATO, it will not recognize any limit and boundary, Khamenei told Putin. Had Moscow not acted first, he added, the Western alliance would have waged a war to return the Crimean Peninsula that Russia seized from Ukraine in 2014 back to Kiev's control, in only his second trip abroad since Russia launched the military action in February. Putin conferred with Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on the conflict in Syria, and he used the trip to discuss a UN-backed proposal to resume exports of Ukrainian grain to ease the global food crisis. Turkey, a NATO member, has found itself opposite Russia in bloody conflicts in Syria and Libya. It has even sold lethal drones that Ukrainian forces have used to attack Russian troops. But Ankara hasn't imposed sanctions on the Kremlin, making it a sorely needed partner for Moscow. Grappling with runaway inflation and a rapidly depreciating currency, Turkey also relies on the Russian market. Erdogan made Putin wait for nearly a minute before entering the room for talks and then praised what he described as Russia's very, very positive approach during last week's grain talks in Istanbul. He voiced hope a deal will be made, and the result that will emerge will have a positive impact on the whole world. Speaking to Erdogan as their meeting began, Putin thanked him for his mediation to help move forward a deal on Ukrainian grain exports. Not all the issues have been resolved yet, but it's good that there has been some progress, Putin added.